I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the co author of the first book, The Power of Remote, no other than Mr. Shane Spraggs.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Shane. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Shane Spraggs. I've been a business leader for 25 years, working out of Canada, British Columbia. I'm very interested in how people work and how to get the most out of individuals. We started working on this book, as you would expect, during the pandemic. Myself and Cynthia, we have lots of years of experience working remotely, and just wanted to try to bring some sanity to the whole remote work conversation. And of course, these days the book is less about remote work because because the technology changes. Pretty much everyone's working remotely. So if you find yourself in a hybrid work environment, or even if you're in the office, you tend to find yourself working remotely from the office. So it's still very, very important to understand the ins and outs of remote working.
Mr. Shane, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And how does the book challenge your current understanding of remote work?
Well, when we started working on it, we realized we didn't need another book to tell people how to work remotely from home. Most people know how to work remotely from home. It's some, you know, it's you pick up your computer and you work from a different location. What we realized was when the pandemic hit, there were three groups of people who didn't understand how to work remotely, and these were managers. Managers have had a real tough time working even prior to the pandemic. We already knew the whole the line, take a good employee, make them a bad manager. That was popular before the pandemic, and we just made it worse for them because now they couldn't see the people they're working with. HR people who have to also help out with the building of culture and managing teams and helping to communicate to the staff and hiring and firing. That's much more difficult at remotely. And the last big category was the executive team who needed some additional help to understand, first of all, what productivity meant and how to measure it, and why it's important to share your uh, your yearly plan more broadly and more regularly with your team. So those three groups are who we focused on in this book.
What insights did you gain about the benefits of remote work?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Remote work, it's not the it's not the gold solution for everything. There's always pros and cons to things, but so it really matters on who you are and what stage of life you're at. For some, it is a great way to save money. On average, a remote worker saves between $3,000 and $5,000 a year on things like gas and whatnot, and clothing, and they don't go out for lunch as often. And so for those of you who are concerned about the finances, which are most people these days, it's a really good opportunity for people to save a bit of money and put that somewhere else. It also gives people the ability to get some time back. You're not commuting to the office, so you get to save on average about 45 minutes each way, about an hour and a half a day for most people in the world, and then you have other tangible things such as being able to have flexibility in your schedule, so you can go pick up your son or daughter at school at 3 o'clock, and or go for lunch, or have an appointment, and not have to make a big deal of it. Finally, for others, it's just more productive. You get a chance to work remotely. Sorry, focus on some work for without any interruptions for a longer period of time. Some people can take their focus time during the times of day they work better. So some people are morning people, some people are evening people, some people are midnight people, and they prefer to get their work done then. And so it really is important that remote workers have these flexible options, and that companies offer those options to their teams. Again, it's not for everyone. There are people who prefer to go to the office for their own reasons, and that's perfectly fine.
Yes. their own choice. How can you apply the strategies in the book to improve your remote work setup?
So we give a lot of ideas here. We have a lot of, in fact, when we first started writing the book, we it was a bit of a challenge with our original editor because I think that they were someone who worked with one. We've all read these business books where there's one idea and it's stretched across the entire book. We have a ton of small improvements, some big concepts as well. But generally, you can go through the book and pick up one or two things at a time and just iteratively improve them. So something as simple as, uh, for example, we're big proponents of a little bit of levity during the day. So if you have a team meeting that's maybe one of the longer ones, your weekly team meeting, throw an icebreaker in. Now, icebreakers tend to be the domain of consultants. They show up at your office, and for the first hour you spend, breaking the ice. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about just a simple 5 minute, maybe as long as 10 activity that is not work, but it's an important part of the process because it gets people to talk about themselves, share a little bit something intimate about that you wouldn't know otherwise, and it builds remote bonds. One of the things we have learned is that brains that fire together wire together, and it's just as possible to build relationships and community online through virtual meetings and other communication as it is to do in the office. In fact, people who play Call of Duty know this very well. There's lots of examples of people who have built teams and real strong relationships with people across the country who they've never met through the gaming platform. And what's happening there is they're firing together. Their brains are firing together. They're working together on something, and that builds the relationships that they need. And we can do the exact same thing in the office. We just need to think about it that way.
Yes, totally agree. So, what did you find the most relatable about the author's experience with the remote work?
So for me, I work remotely. So I've been working remotely for years as well, and uh, I the benefits of remote work speak to me. So and also um, follow some of the best practices of remote work. It is possible for someone who works remotely to have a sense of loneliness, to get siloed. So one of the things I do quite often is, I make an effort to communicate with my team. I'm more proactive with my communication. I also ensure that I have a strong social life outside of work, and I don't rely on the office or the people I work at the office for my social connection. I have some social connection with them, but it's not the strong bonds you get from friendship or family. And so, for example, I've got a friend who I hike with on a regular basis, and we go a hike up a mountain nearby here every morning for some exercise. But it also fills that gap of me, talking to somebody and getting out of the house. And so, there's things that an individual can do to ensure that they are a good remote worker and that they are able to sustain the mental acuity that they need to work remotely.
How do you see the challenges of remote work affecting your own team or organization?
Well, yeah, and this is going to be different for different people. It's a very unique experience for individuals, and so you have lots of companies out there right now toying with this idea of bringing them back to the office. In fact, there's a huge news article right now about the Doge uh, g- government team going to bring all the government workers back into the office, and people are up in arms about it because it really affects their personal sense of freedom and flexibility. Um, for most teams, a the if the key is to focus on productivity and understanding what productivity is. If your team lead or your manager recognizes that you can be productive when they're not looking at you, that's a really good step. But they have to organize the work in a way that every single task you get is connected somehow back to the purpose of the business and the strategy of the company, so that in an ideal world they will have identified the purpose of the business, and from that they'll come up with some long-term goals. Those long-term goals will turn into some yearly priorities and possibly some departmental objectives, and those will generate projects and tasks to accomplish that work. And that's the work you get assigned, and you know that that's how it connects back to what you're doing and why. remote workers tend to need a better connection to the why. Otherwise, they're just logging in and just it gets to be a bit routine, and they need to understand the purpose.
What steps can you take to implement better communication practices in your remote environment?
Well, first of all, be more transparent. It's tough for companies to share more information, but you have to start there. Share as much as you can, and explain to the people why you're sharing it. Communicate more often. The phrase I always have in my head is that by the time they're hearing it, sorry, by the time you're tired of saying it, they're starting to get it. And so, have and communicate in more than one way. Managers get frustrated already that they might send an email out, and a week later someone's like, "Oh, I didn't see that." Sometimes because the remote work people, so because remote workers are very distracted by everything from you know the work that they have to do to the notifications on their phone, their social media, the app, the family they're with. And this is not just unique to remote workers. Everyone's more distracted these days than they used to be. People just aren't paying attention to the information the community country sorry that companies are sharing. And so it's important that it gets reiterated and reshared as often as possible. Something, for example, like the values of the business, you can't just share them the day they start and expect them to remember it. You have to integrate that into everything. Every once in a while you might bring it up in a meeting. You might talk about your values when you do job performance reviews, and so on and so forth. So talk more frequently, expect people to forget it, and make sure you are more transparent.
Transparency, people, is the key. So, what steps can you take to implement better environment for remote work?
Well, if you have a remote team, I'm a big advocate for having standardized hardware and software. So make sure everyone has the same types of computers and equipment at home. This first of all makes things a little more fair across the board, but also reduces chances that one person might have a, a technical bug that prevents them from working that others might not be experiencing. Software as well. Make sure you have some understanding and being more intentional about the software you use. Don't let teams set up their own tools without really putting a lot of thought into it. Um, Set up proper meeting structure. So and one-on-ones. I'm a big advocate for managers to meet with their team members at least once a week, so they have that chance to connect, as well as having a team meeting once or twice a month, maybe more often depending on the nature of the work you're doing. And uh, you have to work harder to be more proactive, to recognize the achievements of others, and share those achievements more frequently. Remote workers need a little bit more communication, a little more coddling. I don't mean that in a negative sense, but they do need to be told that things they're working on are going well, because in the absence of feedback, people assume the worst, and that unfortunately can take people down a path that isn't positive. So a manager has to do a lot more work these days to connect with their team members, make sure that they're doing all right, and just keep an eye out for the people who may have gone quiet. They're easy to recognize because you stop hearing from them in meetings. They may not be contributing to chat messages, and when you haven't heard from someone for a couple of days, make sure you reach out to them and see how things are going. You can't solve all their problems, but it's at least worthwhile to acknowledge them.
Good communication, people, is the key also. So, how do you feel about the power of remote approach to work-life balance in a remote work?
Work-life balance is all very critical. We've long known that people don't work the full 8 hours of a day. In an office, you're lucky to get 4, maybe 5 hours out of somebody. Those extra hours are spent, either in meetings or walking to the washroom, or taking a longer extended break, or taking a break for social media. And the same thing happens at home. That people work a little bit longer at home. They tend to work around 5 to 6 hours at home, so you get a little bit more out of them. But there needs to be an opportunity for them to refresh and relax, and be ready for for creative work. Someone who works, and most people work in creative work in some form or fashion these days, and they need to be able to recharge before they can be successful in the work they're doing. So I'm a big proponent on really looking at humans, the employees as humans, as opposed to just staff. They are people. They need certain needs to be ready to do the work. They need to be able to have well rested, and work life balance plays a crucial role in your company's ability to be more profitable and be more productive and reduce turnover.
What tools or techniques from the power of remote could enhance your productivity?
Excellent. Well, most of them. There's lots of lots of the tools in there. One of the ones that I really really promote is the idea, and this isn't really all that new, but it's something that most companies don't do. It's talking to your team, asking them. Most people are smart. They know what they're doing. They know where the problems are, and we advocate for sitting down, talking to your team. People who work in software companies will know the concept of retrospective. Retrospective is a great tool. It's a type of meeting where when you start the meeting, you ask them to write down all the topics that they want to start, stop, and continue, or some other categories. You can do ideas, things going well, things not going well, and you write all these things down. Traditionally in the office it's some sticky notes, but in remote work it can be on a Miro board or some other digital whiteboard, and those become the agenda for the meeting. And then someone facilitates that meeting, and by doing it that way, you tend to get more information out of people. People tend to share things they wouldn't normally share without really prompting them. And the reason for this is very simple. If I'm running a meeting with you, Daniel, and you say, okay, write down the topics, you have a real tough topic you want to talk about, but it's much easier for you to write it down on a piece of paper, hand it to me, or in this case digitally, and I broach the subject because I don't have any personal connection to it. And then let's say you're fighting with somebody and say, your topic is, there's a there seems to be a lot of friction to between us. Well, I'm just reading that off a piece of off a sticky note, and so those topics get broached more, and we tend to have better conversation. And I would challenge any company who hasn't done, or any team who hasn't done a retrospective in a while, that if they do a retrospective, that they will get a, probably a year's worth of ideas and improvements you can make, because there's just so many good things you can get out of that. And again, as I said, people know where the problems are. The people doing the work know the problems, and you should listen to them. And then outside of that, I also recommend people really pay attention to running meetings. Meetings are good and bad. There's Most people have a love-hate relationship with meetings. I remember even way before the pandemic, people used to hate meetings as well. They're tough to do well. They're tough to get value from them. But we did at Vertera, we did a couple of research projects on not just meetings, but cameras in meetings, and burnout. And one of the biggest causes of work burnout is long stretches of meetings where you don't get a break, which is not surprising. We talked to 1,500 different people, and we came away with a lot of really good suggestions on how to improve meetings.
Definitely. How would you build trust with the colleagues while working remotely, as you suggested, to the power of remote?
It's a fantastic question. One of the key things that managers need to keep in the back of their head is this concept of psychological safety. So psychological safety is the sense that they will not be reprimanded for sharing bad news or making a mistake. All innovation and progress happens through error and mistakes, because people learn when they make a mistake, and people are always at different stages of their career, and you can never assume that someone has had a chance to learn something yet. So a manager can build that trust by showing a bit of empathy themselves and showing when they make mistakes. Don't be this bulletproof, I never make mistakes, I'm perfect. Show some humanity, and when you make a mistake, you own up to it, and very publicly. And don't reprimand someone for making a mistake. Rather, Ask them what they've learned from it, right? Set some targets for how to improve it for the next time. Understand what you need to change to in order for it to avoid that problem again. And that little moment turns into a thing that they can learn from and grow. And what's great about this is kind of where this is where innovation starts to happen, because people start to try things that maybe you don't want to you give them a task to do, and they look for ways to solve it. And if you you know in a team where there is no psychological safety, they will follow your rules to a T. And that might be good if your rules are good, if your task is well laid out. But
Yeah.
oftentimes in business projects these days, and most projects, we give people rough guidelines of what we're expecting them to deliver. So this can very easily provide you with provide the team member some opportunity to grow outside the task and maybe surprise you and maybe find something new that's going to innovate. I often building on innovation just for 2 seconds here. Innovation is one of those ones that people say you need to be in the office for. They also often call it the water cooler conversation. I challenge again every company to think about innovation as being something you want to do, be intentional about. And this is where most companies fail. They rely on the water cooler or happenstance in hallways, or really what it comes down to is good luck. We're relying on good luck for us to innovate and move our company forward. So
Yeah.
even if you're in the office, take ownership of your innovation and have a plan for it. What that means to you, it will be different from company to company, but it's really important that you have control over it. And remote companies have an advantage here because they have to be intentional from the start and from the get go. And they have to figure out how they're going to innovate. And they innovate better because of it.
Yes. Good luck and trust your employee that they will
Yes.
be good enough to
Yeah.
work. So, how can you foster a collaboration in your remote team using the power of remote?
Well, collaboration, again, is something that is very necessary for teams to be successful. You take one person with one set of ideas and you get just one set of ideas out of it, right? You take two people, you get two sets of ideas, but they work together, and they tend to mash those ideas up and come up with something better. Again, back to that innovation concept. Um, Collaboration is just as easy remotely as it is in person. In fact, I would also argue that there's benefits here as well. There are many good tools out there to work together with people. One of the best ones is Miro. I don't get paid for that. I've just been using Miro for a long time, and it's well above anybody else's digital whiteboard. Other companies are trying to compete with this, but they are so far ahead that it's not even funny. And so Miro is a great tool for people to put ideas together and talk through things. I also challenge anybody who thinks about collaboration, who in the office, to really think about how they actually collaborate. In many cases, and I'm guilty of this myself, I tend to do better at coming up with ideas when I'm talking to somebody, right? And that's not necessarily collaboration. That's just me using someone as a muse, or as a shouting as a sounding board. Um, True collaboration comes from listening to the individuals, and so companies can do well to foster, uh, training on empathy, active listening. So that's when you sit back and listen to what people say and regurgitate that in your own words, so they know they heard you, and and then giving people better boxes around when to get together in teams to collaborate on topics. Sometimes your work needs to be done, and that just needs to you go back to your desk and you work on something by yourself. But when ideas are involved or something's unclear, that's when you should get together and have a conversation about it. And that's where collaboration happens, and that's again where you need innovation. Sorry, you need empathy and active listening, and someone to facilitate that conversation.
Yes, I think number one is empathy for everyone. We
It's
need
it,
that
it's sometimes in
attitude.
short supply.
For sure. So, what part of the power of remote advice on leadership resonated with you the most?
For me, the from a leadership standpoint, the key thing is to recognize their role and what their goal is. Someone who works, who's doing the actual work, they're there to do the work, but they need direction from somebody. They need to know what they're working on, and that's where managers come in. Managers can take something to a project to work on and break it into pieces and say, here's what pieces I want you to do. The leaders have, their job is to choose the right stuff for the managers to work on, right? Choose the right projects. And so their role really has to be focused on looking forward. And this is not necessarily specific to remote work, but you need to, but there it is in fact is impacted by remote work because you tend not to have the people on your team to walk around and interrupt and ask questions on the fly and get motivated, get inspired by something in the office. You have to make that intentional. So uh, where at Vertira, where I used to work, the one of the things we did from a yearly strategic planning process is we made it more intentional. We had a company-wide series of retrospectives to provide the opportunity for everybody on the team to provide feedback. We had a net promoter survey that went out to the team to give people an opportunity to give anonymous feedback, and that's those two things are really important. Intentional, specific feedback to be able to take ownership over, as well as feedback that they can just share anonymously to give you the feedback of your team. But we also included, a review of our sales. How did we do this last year? What do we hear from our customers? What are we hearing from the marketplace? Where are we situated in our marketplace? Who are our competitors? And it's really important that leaders don't pay lip service to that whole process of identifying where they sit in the marketplace on a regular basis, and then take that information and be very transparent with it, communicate it as much as you can to your teams, and sit down and go through a very rigorous strategic planning process. And we outline a process in the book about how to do that remotely, because it takes a bit more challenge. Few people are going to want to sit at behind a Zoom conversation for 8 hours a day, and while you're sitting at your computer, you're continuing to get peppered by all the other external things that you have responsibilities to. Whereas in a office, you tend to go and do a remote, so you tend to go to a place where it's just you and the team talking about it. So if you can, obviously, get your leadership team together in a in person. I think there's still some very valuable things that can happen in person, and but focused on where's this company headed and how are we going to get there? What are our best bets and how are we going to measure success as we go towards those?
Definitely. So, Mr. Shane, to sum up the power of remote, how can you embrace the opportunities of remote work using the principles in the power of remote?
Well, a lot's been said about remote work over the last 4 years, and it's kind of come and gone. I like to think about it as where are we going to go in the future? It makes very little sense to me that a startup would spend six to $7,000 a month on an office, lock themselves into just the people they can hire in the near vicinity, and um, not take advantage of the global workforce that is available to people working remotely. So from a business standpoint, there's cost savings, there's flexibility, but you have to turn. It's not just a free for all. You don't just get the office space for free. You got to transition some of that budget into things that aren't so strong remotely, and these are, your culture needs a bit more work. You have to put on virtual events. Maybe you have to get everyone to in person occasionally because that's still valuable, or put more money into learning and development because there's fewer people going to the office these days. A lot of people coming out of school, going to remote work environment, and they're not learning some of the critical baseline stuff that you learn working in an office. you know, showing up on time, and then that's important. Or how to act in a meeting. There's just some basic things that people from the first 5 years of their life learn when they work. Sorry, not life, but first 5 years after after college, that they learn from working in an office that are intangible and hard to work through. So things like teaching facilitation. It's a very simple course you can give a lot of people, and it makes your meetings better. It's a good investment. So, and then I would encourage them to focus on some of the big things. Be transparent, focus on communication, and be intentional with all the things you need to do to make yourself successful.
Very well said. Very well said, Mr. Shane and Miss Cynthia Watson and Mr. Shane Spraggs. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. I hope more books to come to empower us.
Thank you for having me, Daniel.
So, Mr. Shen, can you please invite our listeners to support the power of remote?
Absolutely. So you can find the Power Remote in Amazon. It's very simple to search for it, and it's available for purchase. If you have a Spotify account or or audiobook account, you can get, or sorry, what's the other? Anyways, it's available in audiobook as well, and Spotify premium users get it for as part of their plan. So just search for it there. And then if you want to connect with me, I'm happy to connect with anybody who wants to. My name happens to be unique in LinkedIn, so I'm happy with that. Just search for Shane Spraggs, and you'll find me.
Yes, I'm gonna share our live video through
Awesome.
LinkedIn then. So, people, let's support Mr. Shane Spraggs and Miss Cynthia because if you support them, more empowering books like this. So, Mr. Shane, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, if you have another book